Good evening and welcome to tonight's webinar entitled Plan Your Work and Work Your Plan. My name is Susan Metzger and I serve as the chair of the DAR Leadership Training Committee. And tonight we're joined by one of our vice chairs, Christina Ramos, who serves as one of the vice chairs for webinars for the DAR Leadership Training Committee. How are you doing, Christina?
I'm doing great, Susan. How are you?
Good, thank you. Now tonight you're joining us from sunny California, right?
I am. Yes, I am, and it is sunny.
Great. I bet our members on the East Coast, especially the Northeast, would be very jealous of your temperatures right now.
Oh, I'm very thankful that I'm here.
Yes. Well, maybe tonight's webinar will bring a little bit of that sunshine across the state into all of our members listening in tonight. So, Christina, when we get started this evening and we go on to the next slide, I want to talk a little bit about how we came up with presenting this topic this evening because this is kind of unique. Normally we go out to some of our other committee members and we solicit input for the types of topics we might hear about, say from literacy promotion like we did in December. But this is something that our committee thought would be a great topic to present to our members. And it really was born out of some of your own experience as a new member and a new leader in a newly formed chapter. So why don't we go ahead and go on to the next slide, and why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself and how your chapter became organized and the role of strategic planning in making that successful.
I'd love to. Thank you, Susan. To give you a little of my background, I was a corresponding secretary of an organizing chapter named the Presidio chapter in San Francisco. Pictured here is the organizing regent with me on the right. I then became the first regent of the chapter and served 2 terms, and in those first 4 years, we set many goals and strategic plans so that we would have a healthy, thriving chapter where members come together and celebrate the DAR. With the help and support from chapter leadership and members, we did just that. Starting with 32 members and ending my administration with 180 members and 23% of those members juniors. The DAR gave us all the support and the tools necessary to be successful, and we had a fabulous time doing it.
That's a fantastic story, and I bet it's a story that's replicated at so many new and growing chapters throughout not only our country, but our nation, our world of DAR. But tonight, let's talk about some of the things, some of the ways that you thought that planning specifically helped make your new chapters successful in its growth, and some of the tools that you think could be shared to make other chapters, whether they're brand new or 100 years old, things that can make us successful. So without further ado, Christina, I'm just going to turn it over to you until we get to the question and answer component to share some of your ideas about strategic planning.
Sounds good. Thanks, Susan. So this webinar is going to focus on strategic planning and how we can apply strategic planning to what we do in the DAR. Let's start with talking about the difference between long-range planning and strategic planning. The term long-range planning and strategic planning are often interchanged, but there's a definite difference. And the difference is the emphasis on the assumed environment. So what does that really mean? Well, it means that long-range planning is a disciplined effort to produce fundamental decisions and actions that shape and guide what an organization is, what it does, and why it does it. Long-range planning determines the mission, vision, values, objectives, roles, and responsibilities for an organization. Long-range planning ensures a solid foundation for many years to come. So what's strategic planning? Strategic planning supports strategic thinking and management. It's the basis for an effective organization. It means asking, are we planning our work and working our plan? More precisely, it means there's a definite purpose in mind. There's an understanding of the environment, and there's creativity in developing effective responses to certain factors, keeping in mind the key steps to development and execution of plans. Know your end result. Know the key members involved, and establish a timeline of actionable steps. So what are some of the factors that affect what we plan? Some of those factors could be chapter bylaw changes, announcements, the National Information Packet, training, and membership interests. And there are so many tools that are provided by the Society to help us be successful in what we do. Some examples of these tools are the Prospective Member Database, the Chapter Regions Guide, my favorite, webinars, or the genealogical education programs. For the purpose of this webinar, we'll use membership gain as our example, as I know new members excite everyone, especially me. As we evaluate membership gain, the most important thing to remember is the 3 steps to success. We're going to examine a 3-step success method that begins with understanding the environment. What does it mean? It means once you've determined what your purpose is, such as membership gain, you now look at the factors that can make or break what you're planning to do to gain those members. Once that's done, you then develop effective responses to the factors. How can we make change? How can we respond to the environment? You identify ways to grow what works and change what doesn't. An example would be to suggest implementing something new in the support of membership gain goal. You evaluate the chapter leaders and members who will be key in meeting the membership goal. After you've developed effective responses, you then decide how you want to take action. How do you do it? It's done by putting together the plan. What steps can you take to achieve your goal, and how long will it take? So let's take a look at some examples of 3-step success. When you're looking at membership gain goal, you might evaluate the chapter bylaws. Are the chapter bylaws friendly to prospective members? The response might be the chapter region consults with the bylaw committee to review. The action is the bylaw committee reviews and reports to the membership. Another example is chapter meetings. Are the chapter meetings accommodating to working women? The response is members can discuss if making changes to the meeting schedule makes sense. The action is bringing the idea of changing the date of a few meetings to the chapter membership. What about looking at the goal? Does the chapter have a net membership gain goal? If the chapter doesn't have a membership gain, then adopt the 10% net gain goal recommended by the National Membership Committee. The action would be the membership adopts the 10% chapter membership goal and works on ways to support the goal. What about the chapter registrar? Does a chapter registrar have the tools she needs to accomplish the net gain goal? The Society has lots of training in the form of the genealogical education programs or training provided by her state. The action, the chapter registrar signs up for GEP classes or attends a volunteer genealogist workshop. Another 3-step example involves whether or not the chapter has a membership committee. If the chapter doesn't have one, then the members can form one. The action is the region appoints a membership committee who can start to plan their work. Another example, does the chapter have enough junior members? The response is the chapter regent runs a report in e-membership to ascertain how many juniors the chapter has, and the junior membership committee can work with the chapter members in recruiting new juniors to meet that membership net gain goal. The action is the junior membership committee puts together a plan to work with the chapter membership. Now what about the chapter leaders? Do the leaders have training they need to be successful? The response is chapter leaders can research the many training opportunities that are available through the National Society and their state society in support of their positions. The action is chapter leadership getting together to work on training plan and timeline. What about the chapter membership? Are the chapter members aware of the net membership gain goal? The response would be chapter leaders and members work together to share the membership goals of the chapter. The action would be the chapter leadership sharing the goals with the chapter membership at each chapter meeting and set a goal for the membership. Now, were the key steps addressed? Yes, they were, as the end result was a 10% increase in chapter membership. Did we know who the key members were? Yes, they were identified and brought into the evaluation phase. Were timelines set with actionable steps? Yes, and the timelines would be determined by each action set in support of the plan. So, were strategic planning principles applied to reach the membership goal? Absolutely. Keep in mind that what we've covered can be applied to many things, not just membership gain. There's also Celebrate America, or maybe a community project in support of veterans. There are so many ways that planning your work and working your plan can be effective. Now what do? This is really important. We create a transition plan, documenting all the strategic planning we've done with all the notes we've taken on what worked and what didn't work. And as the next administration comes in, we hand it over. The incoming chapter leadership can evaluate where the chapter is and, depending upon the current environment, can use the same plan or reevaluate and change the direction to keep moving forward. Strategic planning brings forth execution of those plans, which in turn equals success and a well-deserved vacation from all your hard work, or a few extra hours in the library at Continental Congress. Thank you for joining us tonight. Now, next up, we'll answer some questions. Susan, are you still there?
I sure am.
Hi there.
How are you doing? That was great.
Thank you. I'm doing great.
Good. Very informative. We actually had a couple questions come in.
Oh, great.
Run those by you and
Okay.
get your feedback.
There you are.
Great. So the first one is, what does a chapter leader do when she has just enough members just to cover chairmanships that she needs, but can't develop really larger committees? Do you have any suggestions for developing that?
I do. Some chapters have just enough members for their chairmanships and really can't develop larger committees, but it's okay because every chapter is unique. So as long as you've got someone to chair your committee, she can plan her work and work her plan and then pull from the membership to execute.
That's great. And I even imagine that sometimes it's really just matching the personality of the chapter.
Yes.
Maybe you have a chapter that has a lot of junior members, so it makes sense to have a large junior membership committee, and maybe a smaller, say, literacy promotion committee.
Yes, and that's knowing your environment. You evaluate your environment to see what it is that you actually have the bandwidth to work with.
Great. So the other question, you talked about transitions, and I think that's so key to be successful with a chapter. So this question came in that talked about when we look at long-range goals and yet you have short-term board positions. My own chapter, our officers serve for 2 years. So sometimes that might be a longer term, but what's the best way to maintain that flow between those administrations so those goals and that strategic plans continue even when the board changes hands?
Okay, that's a great question. And in the question it was asked about the long-range goals. And our long-range goals, when we think about it, are the goals of our society: historic preservation, education, and patriotism. And so we've got our long-range goals already set. So when we come in, our short-term goals are the ones that so what I'm saying is if a chapter membership decides that they're going to do a 10% membership gain, that's part of the membership committee's goals that's put forth to every chapter. And if the next administration comes in, they can adopt that same net gain goal, or they can choose a different one and build a new strategic plan and change focus just a little bit. But our long-range goals will always be thinking about what is the NSDAR looking at for us to do.
That's great, and I think that that type of idea allows for some flexibility and creativity in between administrations.
Yes,
too.
Absolutely.
Good. So then this one talks about, now you talked about as your examples, you really highlighted membership, and that was obviously so successful in your chapter and with strategic planning. So, but what are some of the goals that you would suggest a chapter starting with strategic planning? Would membership be the best one?
Well, I think it all depends on your chapter and its environment. I think that if a chapter takes a look at where their interests are, and again, the members, or if you only have one person to chair a committee, you're taking a look at what's in your environment. And based on the direction that your chapter is going, that's how you choose what would be best for your chapter to start with.
That's great.
Yeah.
Let's see. It looks like one other question came in, and it kind of relates also to the transition question. So, what's the good time frame to revisit your strategic plan? Is it every time you change an administration? Is it when you know that you've accomplished a certain goal? Do you set a time frame and say every 5 years we're going to do this? What do you recommend?
I think, in my opinion, I like to evaluate what we're doing anytime something in our environment changes. So we set our strategic plan, and again, our strategic plan is based on our environment, and sometimes the environment variables change. So as often as they change is as much as you should be looking at your plan and saying, "Oop, there's been a change, something's happened. Does that directly affect what we're doing as far as the goal that we've set, and if it does, then you can ascertain how it's going to affect you, you can make the change to adapt to it, and then you can keep on executing as you move along.
That's really helpful. Christina, I really appreciate it. I think this type of presentation is something I know would be really helpful in my own chapter. We've had a lot of success with planning, but it's always good to kind of put it in a new context. And, you know, while maybe not everybody is a planner, there certainly is somebody in your chapter that likes this type of strategic planning.
Yes.
Certainly somebody in your state that I bet would like to reach out for chapters and do that type of assistance. And this webinar hopefully would be something they could present in future meetings and kind of start that conversation. So I really appreciate you putting these slides together and giving us kind of the kickoff for some strategic planning for our chapters.
Oh, I'd like to thank you and Susan both for helping me out and helping me put this together. It was a great team effort.
Indeed.
Yeah.
All right. Well, with that, that concludes this evening's webinar, and this will be available on the DAR Leadership Training Committee website for download, and you can share it at chapter or state events. And we appreciate your time commitment for this evening's webinar. Have a good evening.